I never thought I'd be sitting in my empty apartment, staring at the bare walls, thinking about the woman who ruined everything I worked for. She walked out of my life with a suitcase in one hand and my credit cards in the other, leaving me to piece together the wreckage she left behind. And now, she's calling me again, pretending like none of it ever happened. When she first reached out, I laughed. I mean, why would I even consider talking to the person who emptied my bank account and walked away without a word? But there was something in her voice, soft, hesitant, that made me pause. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was calculated, and I knew it, yet a tiny part of me wanted to believe her. What I didn't realize then, what I only understood after weeks of wrestling with my own pride and anger, was that the truth behind why she left wasn't what I thought. And when it finally came out, I couldn't believe how deeply I'd been manipulated. It's funny, in a sick way, I wasn't just heartbroken, I was humiliated, financially ruined, and still somehow curious. I remember the exact moment my phone lit up with her name. I froze. Months had passed since I last heard from her, months of staring at bills I couldn't pay, nights I spent replaying every memory, trying to figure out what went wrong. And suddenly, there it was, her voice calling me, like nothing had happened. My hand shook as I swiped to answer, though a small, nagging part of me wanted to let it ring. "Hey," she said, soft, hesitant. The word felt dangerous, like it could either break me or pull me back in. I stared at the cracked screen of my phone, at the smudged fingerprints I hadn't bothered cleaning, and my heart sank and leapt all at once. I didn't recognize the sound of her voice this way, it was familiar, but carefully polished, almost deliberate. I tried to steady my breathing. "Hey," I said, my voice rough, carrying more weight than I realized. We didn't speak for a long moment. I could hear the faint hum of traffic outside her apartment, or maybe it was mine, I wasn't sure. The line felt too quiet, every small click and static buzz amplified. I wanted to hang up, to protect myself, but my curiosity gnawed at me. What are you doing calling me now?" I asked, more sharply than I intended. My thumb drummed on the edge of the phone, and I noticed the dent in the corner where I'd dropped it last month. She laughed softly, almost nervously, and for a second, I felt the old pull, the way she used to make me forget the world. I just wanted to talk," she said, voice low. "I know I hurt you, and she hesitated. That pause cut deeper than any words she could have said. I couldn't tell if it was guilt or calculation. I glanced around my apartment, half-packed boxes, a broken lamp leaning against the wall, the smell of old coffee lingering in the kitchen, and I realized something. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was terrified of how much I still remembered, how much I still felt. And maybe, just maybe, part of me wanted to hear her out. I swallowed hard, forcing a laugh I didn't feel. "You have a funny way of catching up," I muttered, more to myself than her. She didn't answer right away, and I could hear her quiet breathing on the other end, the kind that made me second-guess everything I thought I knew. That call lasted less than 5 minutes, but when I hung up, I felt like I had been pulled underwater. My chest was tight, my hands were cold, and a question I didn't want to ask myself burned in my mind: why now? And somehow, even as I tried to convince myself not to care, I knew I wasn't going to be able to ignore her for long. I met her on one of those ordinary nights that somehow end up feeling like fate. I was at a friend's party, the kind with too much music and dim lights that make everyone look slightly more interesting than they actually are. She was across the room, laughing at something someone said, and I swear for a second the whole world just blurred. Not in a romantic comedy way, like in the movies, but in a way that made my chest tighten and my thoughts stumble. I don't even remember how we started talking. I think I spilled a drink on myself first, that seems to be my pattern, but she came over, smiled, and somehow that tiny act of kindness made me feel like I'd known her my whole life. She had this way of tilting her head, like she was listening to more than words, like she was reading the tiny tremors in your voice. I remember thinking, how does someone notice the things I don't even notice about myself? We ended up sitting on the balcony, talking for hours while the party raged inside. I remember the chill in the air, the faint smell of rain on the pavement, and the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear as she laughed at one of my dumb jokes. I don't think I even realized it then, but that moment, sitting there under the string lights, sharing stories we barely knew were true, was when I started to trust her completely. She told me about her family, her dreams, the little things that made her who she was. And I told her things I had never told anyone else, my fears, the mistakes I regretted, the hopes I clung to despite knowing better. It felt effortless, like we were both halves of some puzzle that didn't exist until that night. I didn't question it. I didn't think about red flags or cautionary tales. I just let myself feel. I can still see her sitting there, legs crossed, leaning back against the railing, eyes shining in the dim light, completely unaware of how much power she had over me already. I didn't know then that those little details, the way she laughed, the way she listened, the way she made me feel safe, were all going to be the tools she used later. But in that moment, I was captivated, and I didn't care about anything else. And maybe that's the cruelest part of it, I didn't even notice I was giving her everything, my trust, my heart, my attention, long before she asked for it. I just thought it was love. Life with her felt like living inside a movie I never wanted to end. Every morning, she'd wake up before me and make coffee just the way I liked it, strong, black, with a dash of cinnamon. She'd leave little notes on the kitchen counter, tiny reminders that someone cared enough to think of me before I even opened my eyes. I didn't realize how intoxicating it was at the time, how it quietly rewired me to expect her presence as a kind of normal, unshakable truth. We had routines that felt effortless. Grocery runs that turned into long walks, lazy Sundays spent binge-watching shows we didn't even like, and those nights where she'd curl up next to me, fingers tracing patterns on my arm, whispering dreams about places we'd travel to, apartments we'd decorate, lives we'd build together. Everything was meticulously ordinary, but in the best possible way, it felt like we were invincible. Friends admired us. They'd joke about how perfect we seemed, how we laughed at the same things, how we finished each other's sentences. I felt proud, and a little smug, to be part of something that looked so flawless on the outside. I didn't think about what it took to maintain that illusion, about the moments when she disappeared for hours or took calls I wasn't supposed to overhear. I just trusted her, and that trust blinded me. There were signs, tiny ones, that I should have noticed. A bill she said she'd take care of but never did. A little slip in a story that didn't quite add up. The occasional defensiveness if I asked too many questions. But I brushed them off. I told myself everyone has quirks. I told myself that love meant believing in someone fully, even when something felt off. Looking back now, I realize how carefully she built the picture-perfect life around me. Every gesture, every laugh, every late-night conversation was a brushstroke in a painting designed to make me stop questioning, to make me feel safe, to make me compliant. But at the time, I didn't see it. I just saw her, the woman I thought I could trust completely, the person I believed was mine in every sense of the word. And that was the trap. Because the more perfect everything seemed, the more shocking it would feel when the illusion finally shattered. I didn't know it yet, but the life I thought we were building together was only a fragile facade. One wrong step, one small lie, and everything I cherished could, and would, disappear. It started with small things. At first, I didn't even notice. A missing receipt here, an unexplained charge there. I would ask, casually, hoping it was nothing, and she'd smile, brush it off, or make a joke that distracted me long enough to forget. I wanted to trust her, so I ignored the little alarms in my head, telling myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, a small, stubborn voice whispered that something wasn't right. She began staying out later than usual. Work stuff, she'd say, her tone just casual enough that I didn't push. I remember one night, sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, hearing her keys jingle at 2 a.m., and pretending to be asleep because I didn't want to start a fight I wasn't ready to have. The apartment smelled faintly of perfume I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted, but I told myself it was nothing. Money started slipping through my fingers, too. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones. I'd check our accounts, reconcile budgets we'd carefully planned together, and still, something was off. She would give vague explanations, sometimes defensive, sometimes sweetly apologetic, and I would nod, trying to let it go. I told myself love meant patience, trust, faith. I told myself I wasn't imagining things. Even our conversations changed. She'd answer my questions with deflections, laughs that sounded too rehearsed, smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. The woman who had once made me feel seen and safe suddenly felt like a stranger in my own home. And yet, every time I considered confronting her seriously, a part of me froze. I wanted the old version back, the one who made me feel alive, the one I believed I could trust without hesitation. It wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches, no slamming doors. It was subtle, insidious. A missing wallet, a forgotten promise, a lie I couldn't pin down but could feel in my gut. I started losing sleep, replaying tiny interactions, wondering if I was misremembering, if I was overreacting. I doubted myself more than I doubted her. I think that's the cruelest part about manipulative people, they make you question your own instincts. And slowly, quietly, she was rewriting the rules of our life without me realizing it. The cracks weren't wide enough to fall through yet, but they were there, spreading under the surface, and I didn't see how quickly they would widen. By the time I noticed the patterns, I already felt trapped in a reality that was shifting beneath me, and I couldn't stop it. I just didn't know it yet. It happened on a Monday. I came home from work, tired and expecting the usual smell of her coffee brewing, the faint hum of music in the background, the soft laughter that used to greet me when I walked through the door. But the apartment was empty. Silence. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the dull tick of the clock on the wall. At first, I thought maybe she was at a friend's, or running errands. But then I noticed the notes, small, subtle things she usually left behind, her toothbrush missing, her jacket gone, her shoes no longer by the door. And my stomach dropped. I walked from room to room, calling her name softly, as if the apartment itself might answer. It didn't, the texts came later. Just one at first. I'm sorry. I can't do this right now. No explanation. No apology beyond a single word. And then. Nothing. Days passed. Phone calls went unanswered. I tried to rationalize, maybe she was stressed, maybe something happened, but the doubt was already clawing at me. The same woman who had built my trust so carefully had vanished without a trace. Financial chaos followed immediately. She had access to our shared accounts, credit cards she swore she'd never touch. I logged in one night and felt my chest tighten, overdrafts, maxed cards, subscriptions I didn't recognize. Bills I thought were paid were suddenly overdue. I spent nights on the floor, calculator in hand, trying to figure out how to cover the damage while keeping the lights on. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was humiliated, financially exposed, and completely unprepared. I reached out to friends, desperate for guidance, but the conversations were awkward. Everyone had their theories, she must have been stressed, she must have needed space, but no one understood the mix of betrayal and confusion that weighed on me. I felt isolated, as if the world had shifted and left me behind. I began replaying every memory, every smile, every small gesture I'd once cherished, wondering which were real and which had been part of a carefully constructed illusion. I still remember sitting on the edge of my bed one night, staring at the empty space she used to occupy, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, and realizing I didn't just miss her. I missed the person I thought she was. And the thought hit me like a punch, I had been played. By the time I understood the full extent of her disappearance, how calculated it had been, I had already started picking up the pieces of a life she had left broken. But even in the darkest moments, a small, irrational part of me wondered if she'd come back. After she disappeared, life became a series of small, grinding tasks. Paying bills one at a time, sorting through her things she had left behind, wondering if I should keep them or throw them out. I spent more nights than I care to admit sitting on the couch with my head in my hands, staring at the muted TV, pretending it was company. The apartment felt too big, too quiet, and every little sound reminded me that she wasn't there. Friends reached out, some genuinely concerned, some awkwardly curious, but I couldn't bring myself to tell the whole story. How could I explain that the woman I had loved had taken everything I had trusted her with and vanished? Instead, I smiled politely, nodded, and kept the humiliation tucked away. Talking about it aloud made it feel real, and I wasn't ready to face that truth. I tried to rebuild, though. Slowly. I took odd jobs, cut unnecessary expenses, and started sleeping with the lights on again. Each day felt like I was assembling a broken puzzle without a picture to guide me. I realized I was holding on to more than just money. I was holding on to hope that somehow, things might make sense again, that maybe she would explain, apologize, or return. That part of me was stubborn, maybe even foolish. Even in the quiet moments, resentment bubbled beneath the surface. I found myself replaying our conversations, analyzing every detail, wondering if I had ignored signs, if I had been too trusting, too naive. And alongside that anger, there was humiliation, pride bruised by betrayal, a sense of exposure I couldn't shake. I had always thought of myself as careful, rational, someone who could see through lies. She had proven me wrong. But somewhere in the mess, I also felt a strange, guarded hope. Not love, not trust, not forgiveness, just the flicker of curiosity that made me wonder why she left, and why now she was trying to reach back in. That tiny ember made me both wary and restless. I knew I couldn't ignore it forever, no matter how much my mind screamed that I should. I started walking past the places we used to go together. Coffee shops, little parks, streets lined with the kind of trees she loved. It was like visiting a ghost of our life. And every time I caught a glimpse of someone who looked like her, her walk, the tilt of her head, I felt that old pull. That mix of longing and bitterness, humiliation and curiosity. I hated it. I hated her for making me feel it. I hated myself for still feeling it. And yet, despite all the pain and the empty rooms, I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if she came back? Would I recognize her, or the life we had, or just the memory of what I thought we were? That question lingered, heavy and unrelenting, as I tried to move forward. It started with a text. I wasn't expecting it, and for a second, I thought my phone had glitched. Her name lit up the screen, and my thumb hovered over it, trembling slightly. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately, to erase the possibility of reopening a wound that hadn't healed. But curiosity, stubborn, irrational curiosity, won. Her message was simple. Can we talk? Nothing else. No explanation, no apology, just those 3 words that carried more weight than they should. I stared at it for what felt like hours, pacing the apartment, tapping the screen without answering. I thought about all the months I had spent rebuilding, about the humiliation, the sleepless nights, the constant gnawing doubt. And yet, I couldn't ignore it. I remembered the way she used to text me late at night, joking, teasing, sharing thoughts she never voiced aloud. That memory hit me like a punch, part longing, part resentment. I wondered if this message was the same, or if it was something else entirely. Part of me screamed to leave it, to protect myself, but another part whispered, "You deserve answers." I eventually replied, cautiously, choosing my words as if they were fragile glass. She responded almost immediately, her tone apologetic, tentative. "I know I hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want a chance to explain." I read it 3 times, each time feeling my pulse quicken. The air in the room suddenly felt heavier, and I realized I had been holding my breath without noticing. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. Not every day, not enough to feel comfortable, but just enough to unsettle me. She asked about my life, my work, my well-being, and every innocuous question felt loaded. I found myself rereading her words, analyzing punctuation, tone, even the time they were sent. Was she genuinely remorseful, or was this some subtle manipulation, a way to pull me back into her orbit? I couldn't deny the mixture of emotions it stirred, bitterness, humiliation, cautious hope. Each message was like a small tug-of-war in my chest. I would tell myself, don't engage, only to respond moments later. I wanted to know why she left, what she was thinking, what she had been doing, but I also feared the answers. And then came the invitation, a simple question that carried an unspoken weight. Do you want to meet? I stared at my phone, feeling a surge of conflicting emotions: anger, curiosity, fear, and that lingering, irrational pull. My apartment suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. I knew that whatever choice I made next would change everything. I agreed to meet her, though I don't know if I should have. The coffee shop was quiet that morning, the kind of place where sunlight filters in just enough to make everything look warmer than it is. I arrived early, fidgeting with my hands, and couldn't help scanning the room for her before I even ordered. When she walked in, it hit me immediately: how familiar she looked, yet how different. Older, maybe, sharper around the edges, like she'd been carefully polishing herself for months I hadn't seen. She smiled, that same half-tilt of her head that had always made me feel like she could see straight into my thoughts. But now, it felt different. Calculated. I sat across from her, my hands wrapped around a cup that had already grown cold, and tried to steady my racing thoughts. Why did I agree to this? I wondered, because deep down, I already knew it was dangerous to open that door. We started talking, cautiously at first. She asked about my life, my work, the mundane details of routines she had no part in for months. I answered, keeping my voice even, trying not to betray the flood of emotion under the surface. And as we spoke, memories began surfacing uninvited, tiny things I had forgotten, little lies I had dismissed, moments that now felt like clues I had overlooked. I remembered the way she laughed when I asked about money, the vague excuses, the sudden defensiveness that I had chalked up to stress. I remembered the late nights when I pretended to sleep, the small inconsistencies in her stories, the perfume I didn't recognize. Each memory landed like a small weight on my chest, and I realized I had been seeing the puzzle pieces all along. I had just refused to connect them. She told me a little about herself too, carefully, choosing her words like they were pieces of a game I didn't know I was playing. She seemed remorseful, and a small part of me wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the woman I loved had been trapped by circumstances, that maybe I had misunderstood everything. But another part of me, the part that had spent months picking up the pieces she left behind, didn't trust her. Couldn't. And as I listened, trying to balance curiosity with caution, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: the pull to forgive, or at least understand. But the more she spoke, the more I realized how carefully she had constructed the narrative, leaving out details, guiding me towards sympathy without ever telling the full truth. I felt both drawn in and repelled, aware that the next few minutes could undo months of self-preservation. By the time I left the coffee shop, my chest was tight, my thoughts tangled. I didn't know whether I felt relief, hope, anger, or a twisted mix of all three. All I knew was that the truth, whatever it was still out there, waiting for the moment she couldn't hide it anymore. It hit me all at once, the way the pieces finally fell into place. She wasn't apologizing because she felt guilty, she was apologizing because she wanted me back. Not just me, but my life, my stability, the way I had scrambled for months trying to recover from the hole she'd left. And that realization cut deeper than anything else. I sat there, stunned, my hands gripping the edge of the table, knuckles white, staring at her as she tried to explain herself. I had my reasons, she began, and the hesitation in her voice made my chest tighten. I leaned back, barely breathing, waiting for the words that would finally tell me why. And she did. She admitted that when she left, it wasn't just impulsive, it was calculated. She had drained our accounts, planned her exit, made it look like stress or exhaustion. She had watched me struggle, she had watched me rebuild, and she had thought she could step back in when it suited her. I felt disbelief first. Then rage. Then humiliation. Every memory of her kindness, the coffee, the notes, the laughter, flashed before my eyes, twisting into a lie I had been willingly blind to. She had been shaping me, controlling me, manipulating every part of my life while pretending to love me. And yet, even as I sat there, part of me still wanted to reach across the table, to salvage something, anything, because old habits die hard, and old feelings are stubborn. You knew how much I trusted you, I whispered, voice trembling, not wanting anyone else to hear. You knew how much I gave, and you used it. She looked down, fidgeting with her fingers, but there was no real remorse, not the kind that could fix anything. Only regret for being caught, and maybe a hint of longing, like she was hoping for forgiveness anyway. I could feel the quiet weight of everything she had taken, the money, yes, but more than that, my confidence, my pride, my sense of safety in the world. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was practical, tangible, and it left scars that no apology could erase. I wanted to stand, storm out, slam the door, and never look back. And part of me did. But another part, the part that had loved her, or thought I had, wanted to hear more, to understand how someone could destroy everything and still expect a second chance. By the time I left that coffee shop, I wasn't just angry. I was shattered, humiliated, bitter beyond words. And I realized something else, something worse, even knowing the truth, even seeing the calculation behind every smile, every touch, a small part of me still wondered what it would have been like if she hadn't left, or if I had somehow forgiven her. That's when I understood the cruelest part: the damage isn't just in what she took. It's in the part of me that can't stop asking, should I even consider letting her back in? After that meeting, nothing was the same. I went home and stared at the apartment, the space that had once been our life together now feeling like a museum of betrayal. I touched objects she had left behind, the coffee mug she always used, the notebook with her scribbles, and felt a mix of anger and grief. They were reminders not of love, but of manipulation. I realized I had been living in the shadow of someone else's choices for months, and it left me hollow. Rebuilding my life became about more than paying bills or recovering financially. It was about reclaiming my sense of self, my pride, and the trust one had lost in my own judgment. I started saying no more often, setting boundaries, and learning to recognize the warning signs I had once ignored. But even as I became stronger, there was a quiet ache, a lingering question about what might have been if things had gone differently, if she had truly loved me the way I thought she did. I haven't answered her messages since that day. Part of me wants to, part of me wants closure, answers, maybe even a twisted sense of connection, but the larger part knows that responding could open the door to more manipulation. The tension between my desire to understand and my need to protect myself is exhausting. Every time my phone buzzes, I flinch, wondering if it's her or someone else, and for a brief moment, the old feelings, hope, longing, vulnerability, rush back. And here's the hardest part: I keep questioning myself. Am I being too rigid? Too cold? A small, unreasonable voice whispers that people change, that she might have truly learned from her mistakes, that forgiveness is supposed to be strength, not weakness. But then I remember the months of struggle, the humiliation, the careful planning that went into leaving me broke, and that voice fades under the weight of reality. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever see her again, or if I even want to. All I know is that I'm standing at a crossroads: protect myself completely, or risk reopening a chapter that nearly destroyed me. There's no clean answer, no satisfying resolution, just a heavy, unresolved question that follows me everywhere. Maybe this is what betrayal really leaves you with. Not just loss, not just anger, but a choice that feels impossible to make. Because no matter what I decide, I know one thing for sure: some scars don't fade, and some doors, once closed, can never be opened the same way again.